Just letting people coming in. Yeah, I can see people joining now. Yes, people joining now. So, hello everyone, and welcome to the Startup Seminars. Hopefully, many of you have tuned in already from last week, and you've learned or you've been starting to learn more about City Ventures and our offer at City University. So just a quick recap, we had the startup seminars, we had the startup camp happening last week, then we had the City Spark grand final where you've seen 10 finalists battling for a prize pot of 25k. And we also had our very first startup seminar with Pablo Ettinger being interviewed by Lauren Lefranc, and he was telling more about going from an idea to business. Hopefully towards the end of December, we'll have the City Spark Marketplace, and in between we'll have the whole series of startup seminars happening. So tonight we'll have our second. To find out more about what we do at City University in terms of entrepreneurship, so just head to city.ac.uk/City Ventures or entrepreneurship. And then once you click on the start button, you will get access to the startup camp, the City Spark Grand Final, the seminars, and business advice, and many, many other things that we put together for you as a student or recent graduate. So today on the startup seminars, we have the great pleasure of having Gav Thompson, the founder of giffgaff. He will be telling you more about targeting your customers. We've made a promise that we were going to ask him to dress like Luigi, but thankfully he has not dressed like him. But before we head straight to the seminar, a few things from your to-do list. The first one is the one-to-one startup advice that we give to you as a student. So if you have your iPhone with you or your Android phone, just point to the QR code and that will take you straight to the page where you can book an appointment either with myself or one of my colleagues to help you with your business idea. Don't forget that next week we will have Eve Wag. She's the founder of Well Grounded. This is an academy helping people to get into the coffee industry, and she will be telling us more about creating business purpose. Again, if you want to register for the event, just point your phone to the QR code and that will take you straight there. One thing that I should say about Eve is that she actually studied at City and she completed a master's in one of the charitable programs, and she will be joining us next week. So to the next slide. Don't forget that if you join us for 6 or more startup seminars, we'll be issuing you a certificate, and this will look nice with the rest of the certificates that you will get from City University. And now, without further ado, put your virtual hands together for Gav Thompson. Hello, Gav. Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Hello, Rui. Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for coming along today.
And how are you doing today?
I'm good. Yeah, it's just started raining here, but no, I'm fine. Sorry about the slightly strange backdrop of my office.
I'm liking the kind of Lego-like giffgaff background that you have behind you, supporting the brand as always. I'll be asking you a few questions, but before I do, I have to share with our people attending that Gav is the founder of giffgaff, as many of you already know. He has nearly 15 years of experience in marketing and digital innovation. He has been on the top 100 UK marketing professionals, and he has worked with Boden, Volvo, Pepsi, New Balance, PlayStation. I'm a big fan. And he's the voice behind the Do podcasts. If you haven't tuned into the Do podcast, please do. And they actually have a funny motto. And then the person behind the story and the story behind the person. And he interviews quite a fair share of famous people, entrepreneurs themselves, people that one way or another you've worked with. Am I right, Kev?
Yeah, so far they're mostly people I've worked with. I'm branching out now to include lots of other people. But yeah, please do have a listen. It's not sort of purely about business entrepreneurship, but it's definitely has a thread of that running through it.
Fantastic. And then you said that you'll be starting the second series soon?
Starting the second series in about 3 or 4 weeks. And my first guest on the second series is Adam Buxton of podcast fame. So yeah,
You must be very excited. You must be very excited. A few questions just before we get into your journey and your presentation. Just tell us a little bit about you. Where did you grow up?
Sure. So my dad was a vet in the army, so we sort of lived around the world a bit. We lived for a chunk of when I was small in Germany, and then I lived for 6 years as a kind of teenager in Hong Kong. So which was a fantastic place to live as a teenager. I had a lot of fun, and I think that fed my slightly kind of techie habit. I spent hours just walking around looking at the hi-fi and camera shops. So yeah, and then I moved back to England when I was about 17.
And what was your family like in terms of environment?
So my dad was a vet, my mum was a doctor, so not really into business or commerce or entrepreneurship or marketing. I thought I wanted to be an actor, so I studied drama at university, and again, my parents, although very supportive, were a bit sort of not quite sure why you're studying drama, and then when I graduated, it became clear that they were probably right, and I had very little talent or ability, hence why I moved into advertising quite soon afterwards.
Okay, and in terms of interest, you mentioned cameras before. What other interests you have as a teenager, maybe?
I was really into gadgets, so I was definitely I had the first sort of CD player. I had one of the first CD players of all my friends.
Walkman.
It was amazing. So I was just into tech and gadgets, and I was lucky living in Hong Kong. In those days, the tech in Hong Kong was literally 12 months ahead of the tech in London. So I had the first CD player, I had the first, one of the first sort of digital Walkman-y things. Yeah, and tech was my thing.
Okay, and because this will be relevant to our audience, if I was going to ask you in terms of entrepreneurship, what kind of entrepreneur do you think you are? Are you a thinker? Are you a maker? Are you a fixer? A combination of the three?
I'm 100% a thinker.
Oh.
Giffgaff is a good example. I came up with the idea, I did all the research, sort of built the business plan, and then I had to give it to somebody else, but sort of build the operational capability of the CEO, Mike. And then so it was kind of a funny thing. I developed it for 9 months, gave it to him. He then built it, and then him and I then kind of ran it together. But I'm definitely, I'm not an operational guy. I'm all about the ideas, and then quite a lot about the running. I just can't build anything. So I declare my weakness straight away there.
It's not a weakness, I would say. And thank you for giffgaff. I've been a customer of giffgaff. In fact, I actually got an email a few days ago saying congratulations for your first 5 years. And I was like, oh, that's nice of you.
Thank you.
So yeah, and a lot of people in our team are actually giffgaff as well. I would say last question for me, really. So you think you know your customers, don't you? So tell us what led you to becoming the founder of giffgaff, and with this, we'll kind of kick off your presentation.
Sure. Well, I started off in advertising. I spent 13 years in ad agencies in London, New York, Sydney. And the thing about when you work in advertising is you generally have sort of 3 or 4 accounts, and they rotate every 6 to 12 months. So at one point, you could be working on a beer brand, a car brand, a healthcare brand. And so what you have to do very quickly is learn about that market and learn about the business. And I learned very early on, the best way to learn is to talk to the customers, because you can't learn as much about the technical side of the business or the business side of the business as your clients, the marketing department. What you can do is go and talk to customers, often either ambiently in shops or bars or, on the tube, or you can do it in sort of research focus groups. So that taught me how to, I always thought that was my kind of X factor, was just talking to customers, understanding what they wanted. And then when I moved to O2 after 13 years in advertising, again, I knew nothing about the telco market. And so I spent the first sort of year, 18 months, just talking to customers about what they liked, what they hated, what they could change. And that, as I'll tell you in a minute, that kind of led to the giffgaff story. But and again, if you sort of take nothing out of this presentation, everyone, I think the more time you can spend talking to potential customers or real customers is time well spent. You uncover such amazing insights.
That's a piece of advice that I normally give to our students that come to our consultations. That research through customers, it's fundamentally are the foundations of any good business idea. Ladies and gentlemen, with that in mind, I'm going to leave you in the good hands of Gav. Please do use the Q&A to ask questions. We'll be answering them towards the end of the session. So once again, Gav, thank you for your time. I'll leave you to lead the session now. Okay.
Cheers, Ruth. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
So yeah, hello again to everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining us on this sort of kind of wet and cold October evening. It's a real pleasure to be asked to talk to you actually. And I was just saying to Rui and Alex, this really is the bit of entrepreneurship that I get most excited about. Actually, the customer insight, the idea, and then the product market fit. So absolute pleasure to talk to you. I'm going to illustrate it through the giffgaff story because it's a good story, and because you now know the business, I think you'll be able to sort of relate back to some of the insights and how I got to it and what we did right and wrong. I'm just going to confess, I did write a couple of slides purely about research, but for some reason, since I wrote them, they've disappeared. So if you have specific questions about research methodology, do ask them at the end. Hopefully you'll get a good feel of what we're talking about, but apologies that literally as Rui came on, these two slides I wrote just purely about research have gone. But anyway, so let me kick off. I'm going to go on to presentation screen. So my weird sort of shiny bald head will disappear. But at the end I'll come out and yeah, please fire away for questions, and I'll try and leave enough time for questions as well. So I think this bit will probably take about half an hour, maybe 25 minutes, and then we'll get into the questions. Okay, so let me just check that you can see this. Hold on.
Yeah, it's working. Yeah, I can see.
Stuff. Okay, so we're going to talk about targeting your customers and understanding what they want. Look, as Rui said, I've worked for a lot of brands over the years, in a lot of markets, 26 years. I think the thing that unites all of them, they're pretty much all consumer brands, and they're all brands that have relied quite heavily on marketing. So I think I am quite qualified to talk about this. Obviously, giffgaff is the key bit of entrepreneurship there, but if you look at my LinkedIn or CV, I did spend 3 years sort of running the innovation function for O2 and Telefonica, and I was involved in Wira, which is the Telefonica incubator. So I have spent more time than it looks here dealing with startups and talking to entrepreneurs and founders. And then, yeah, and then bottom right are those three businesses, Yopa, Paddy Power, Bowden. I've been CMO of all of those, and Yopa was a tech startup when I joined, still is. Okay. So I'm going to talk about sort of broadly about customer targeting and understanding, but rather than just kind of give you a lecture, because that's probably not that interesting, I will illustrate it through the story of giffgaff. And then I'll summarize, but yeah, I think questions definitely fire away. So in essence, why is customer insight important? Well, it's important because it can help you get to the best product market fit, PMF, which, as I'm sure you know, is the kind of absolute sort of starting point for any business or product or service that you want to launch, which is what is the product idea, what is the market, and how do you stitch those two things together? And that's definitely a fluid process. Oftentimes you start with a product and you can't necessarily find the market for it. Sometimes you start with a market problem and you've got to develop the product. And in my experience, it is like a jigsaw. You have to kind of adapt both. And I think getting decent customer insight, understanding who your customer is, understanding your target audience will actually, funnily enough, help with both. I mean, it helps define the market, but it also helps you tweak and amend and sort of, get to the right product. And you can sometimes, as in giffgaff's case, we actually had to slightly change and pivot the product, which I'll get to in a minute. So the process towards PMF is, it often starts with a hunch. And again, I'll tell you the giffgaff story in a minute, but you've got just a hunch of a problem. Again, they can either be, you've got a product idea, you've invented something. So often, in tech innovation, someone invents a widget, a thing, and then they've got to work out who they market it to. Or you can be sitting on a train, on a plane, in a bar, walk down the street one day, and you have an idea for fixing a problem in the market, either a problem that hasn't been fixed before, or you just have a good idea. Then you've got to do some research. You've got to really dig into what the problem is, confirm there is a real problem, because sometimes if you think there's a problem, there may not be a market there. Maybe it's literally just there's only kind of one person in every city that's identified this problem. That's not really going to build a business. And so there's you need to do a lot of research. We'll come on to it in a minute, of who the target audience is, what they currently think of the market, who they are, what the segments are, where they currently spend their money, what business or product is currently meeting that need, who the competitors are, and in doing that, you'll get to stage 2, which is what's called an MVP, the minimum viable product, and that is the sort of the your first best effort at getting to this product market fit. What's the basic raw product look, feel, sound like, cost that you could use to deliver against this market need? Again, I'm making this all kind of sound quite sort of simple, and that's a combination of desire, so the need of the market, and then feasibility. What can you actually deliver in a reasonable time frame for a reasonable amount of money that you have the capability, or you can get capability to deliver? So the whole thing about this stage of the building of a business is very, very fluid. You then have some product iteration, so you do beta testing, so that's you get the MVP in front of the customer, you do some trials, beta trials with 10, 50, 100, maybe 500 customers, and you start to work out which bits of the product work, which don't work, which bits the customer value, which they don't value. And again, you have to be prepared at that point to adapt and pivot and change things. And then at that point, you get to the sort of product market fit, the sort of holy grail, which is desirability, customers want it, feasibility, you can build it, and then viability, you can make it work, you can make money out of it, you can scale it. And that's, in a nutshell, the PMF process. But for me, the key to unlocking that is really understanding the customers and really understanding the customer needs. So, like I said, there's sort of 2 places to start when you're building a business, or you want to build a business. Identify a problem to solve, an opportunity to unlock, and that's in some ways for non-tech specialists, so generalists like me, that's always going to be where I'm going to start. I'm not a technical guy. I'm not going to invent something. I'm going to, and I've often done this, look at a market, look at a business, and realize there's a way to do it better that customers will appreciate. But the second way is you develop or invent a product or solution. That happens a lot. It certainly happens a lot in California, where you develop a piece of capability, tech capability often, and then you have to work out who's going to be the customer, what is the market. Neither are right or wrong. They're both very, very valid ways. Sometimes, if you're really lucky, you get to both. And again, I'll tell you the giffgaff example of how we kind of got to it. But generally, it's either you've got a hunch or you've invented something. Now, and again, the key to unlocking either one of these is customer insight. I think I've seen it so many times. The single biggest thing I found when I was at Telefonica at Wira, the incubator fund, is we get hundreds of really early stage businesses, startups coming through the door, and 9 times out of 10 they'd invented something. So they'd just any kind of sort of widget, they'd invented something. And you said, who's the customer? And they kind of were like, I'm not really sure. And the odd time when you met a founder or an entrepreneur who started with the customer insight and the customer need was a real breath of fresh air, because actually, that for me, that's the difference between an invention and an innovation. Anyone can invent something in their shed. An innovation is something that actually is meeting a need. So I would urge you to spend way more time on customer insight than perhaps you want to, maybe feel comfy doing. And it doesn't have to be formal research, because formal research is both expensive and sometimes misleading, and I'll tell you why in a second. For me, it is always just go to where the customer is and just hang out and observe to start with. So if it's something in retail, just go and hang out in retail stores. If it's something, in online travel agency, just go and go and read lots of Trustpilot reviews of online travel agents, or go to forums. I mean, forums are a gift. I mean, they were the reason I came up with the giffgaff idea, as I'll explain in a second. But they're a gift for just because you can go in anonymously, and you can just start asking people questions. And generally, the goodwill of the internet is people will answer them. So you don't have to do formal customer research, but there is so much stuff now of people just sharing thoughts and ideas on brands and businesses on YouTube. There's so many forums. So you can actually, I think, pick up a lot of customer insight just by being where customers are. When I was working in the kind of alcohol industry, I mean, it was a tough job, but I spent a lot of time sitting in pubs. I was that kind of weird sort of guy at the bar it was really weird when I say it, but I'd observe people and I'd kind of go up to them and say, look, if I buy you all a round of drinks, can I have a chat with you about how you feel about, alcohol-free beer, or how you feel about zero temperature lager, and actually, if you buy someone a beer, it's amazing how much goodwill they'll give you. And the other little trick is just to go and buy a load of sort of £5 Amazon vouchers. And if you're if you're in a shop or on the high street or waiting at a train station, if you go, look, I'm to be honest, I'm an entrepreneur, I've got this idea for business, do you mind if I ask you some questions and I'll give you a £5 Amazon voucher? You'd be surprised at how suddenly you'll get 10 minutes of really good insight. And I think at the stage one of a business, it is just talking to customers and understanding, what the art of the possible is. What is it? And the question I always found really interesting is what do you really hate about the current service you get? Wherever the business is, what is it that if you had a magic wand, you could change one thing, what would you change? Because that's quite a telling question. Because oftentimes people aren't that involved in a business or a sector. If it's car insurance, or it's, you've developed some piece of tech that will shave, 1 second off a download time. I mean, it's just, for some people, that's just not kind of that interesting. But if you kind of get to the negatives, if you had a magic wand, what would you change? What's the one thing you really don't like about the service? You'll get there eventually. Now, the more obvious the sector is, the more consumer facing, the easier the research is. Sometimes if it's B2B, it's much, much harder. But, stick with it. And the other thing, which is really important in any form of customer research, is you want some people to kind of hate it. Particularly if you're doing a startup business, the worst response you can get to your idea is kind of, it's all right. If you get to the stage of you're sharing the idea with some customers and they just go, yeah, that's all right, quite like it. That's not really a great response. In my opinion, you want some people to go, I absolutely love it. That's amazing. I've never, that's new and I'd pay for that. And you also want some people to go, no, that's not for me. Don't like it. Can't afford it. Don't value it. That's really good at this stage of a business. You want a core target audience who you can get to love your business. And frankly, if the majority of people don't like it, that's also fine. So when I was advising startups, I would go, who are the fans? Go and find the fans. If it may only be 5 or 8 or 10% of the target audience, that's okay, because that's a market. I'd rather have 5 or 10% people who I love it, sort of 40 or 50 just going near, and another 40% going, I absolutely hate it. That's fine. There's loads of businesses that have been set up like that. And as we know, some of the best businesses, when they were researched, people were like, no, I hate that. So don't let that put you off. If literally, and not just your mum, but if somebody actually thinks that's a really good idea, then crack on. And there's so much stuff online now. There are lots of market reports. There's just if in doubt, become the customer yourself. Just do lots of mystery shopping. Just go and experience either the service online, or go and get on the phone to the call center, get in the shop, and just experience it. Just understand kind of what's going on. I mean, the reason I developed giffgaff was I was new to the mobile phone industry, and I was going into shops and I didn't understand what they're talking about. They were 3G, 4G coverage maps, price per megabyte. I just go, I don't understand it, so there's no way customers will. And just like I said, bottom right, just try and get inside the customer's heads. Okay, that's what success looks like. Look at the business through the eyes of the customer. Don't be too precious as the entrepreneur, as the founder. Just, and be prepared for customers to go, I really don't like that. Be prepared to be wrong. Be prepared to get your first idea is wrong. Your MVP might be wrong. but be prepared to pivot and evolve and not be too precious, and just try and get a sweet spot of sort of love and emotion and fandom. Okay, I'm going to rattle through this. Story of giffgaff. So look, I was, as I said before, I worked in brand ad marketing. I'd also worked in advertising. And actually, I had this kind of view, which was odd given I was an advertising guy. Advertising didn't work. And we're talking, this is 12 years ago, 13 years ago. I just thought no one watches ads anymore. So that was a kind of start point. And I went to O2 with this in my head that actually there's got to be a better way of doing marketing than just sort of advertising. So the business problem. So you can sort of start with start with the business problem, or start with a hunch. The business problem was that I realized that there were some customers of O2's that whatever we'd done in the past, they'd never become loyal to O2. We didn't actually have a name for them. They were about 10% of our base. And I could see when I went into shops, I'd go to Carphone Warehouse, I'd see them shopping different networks, and I realized I didn't really care. There was the blue one, the pink one, the orange one, and the red one. And they'd go with whichever one was the cheapest. And they didn't, when the salesperson said, well, you get tickets to O2, or you get, free 2-for-1 meals at Pizza Express, they just didn't care. They were like, and you'd hear them say, look, I don't want that. I've got my nephew understands more about phones than I do. I've got an old handset in the drawer. I'm not that interested in all the kind of bells and whistles. So that was the business problem, where 10% of our base, we call it churn. They were just churning in and out. And that's, 10% of a business when you've got 25 million customers, that's 2.5 million customers. So it's, it was worth trying to address their needs. The customer insight was sort of multiple. So it was a combination of, like I said, they didn't really want the tickets to go to, they weren't that bothered. They didn't want to speak to call centers because they were either quite digitally savvy themselves, or they had a friend or someone in their kind of network who was. So there was an element of these guys were a bit younger, they were a little bit geekier. They weren't like super geeks. They just didn't want to get queue in a call center and all that stuff. They definitely didn't want to walk down the high street and sort of shop around. They weren't that interested. They just wanted good value for money, sort of no bullshit, a much kind of fairer, equal relationship with their network supplier. And bottom right, they definitely did not want to be sold a long-winded, legally contract by some young guy in a shiny suit who was clearly on commission. They just weren't interested. They wanted a phone. They wanted to be able to not be locked into it. They wanted it to be quite cheap, and they didn't care about all the marketing bells and whistles. They didn't really care about the call center. So that was the customer insight. And again, I'm sort of making it appear quite simple and quite sort of blasé with hindsight. That took a while, actually. That did take me a while to work that out, and it wasn't, you won't get necessarily customers sort of telling you that in a research group. You had to kind of go and observe it, and you had to sort of go, look, if I got this network, this SIM card that costs you 10 quid, or this one that costs you 12 quid, but this is, prior to O2, which one do you want? A lot of people want the prior to O2, frankly, but some don't, and it was those ones we were targeting. Now, tiny bit of again, if you it's hard at the moment, obviously, but the best ideas will not come from behind your laptop. That I firmly believe that. I say that to lots of entrepreneurs whose ideas kind of don't get through the MVP gate. You go, look, just go and come up with another idea, and they go, well, and get out there. Literally, just get out there. Again, hard at the moment. Out on the street, out into shops, talk to people, listen. Just be quite nosy. Just go. I used to hang around shops and just overhear conversations, and it sounds a bit weird, but you'll get a little nugget of information, or talking to your friends. I've had giffgaff was not my best business idea, by the way, and I'll come back to it in a minute. It's probably my third best. The other two never made it, and often that's the case. But the other two, one came out of I listened to a TED talk, and I heard someone say something that literally one sentence inspired me, and the other was I overheard someone saying something in a shop. So they don't. Sometimes it literally is those kind of flashes, but I would urge you just to get out, and even if you've got half an idea, go and just get out and sort of talk to people about it. So the technical innovation. So like I said, there's a process. There's sort of things have to come into play when you're building a business. For me, the tech innovation was a thing called Web 2.0, which is so dated now, you probably haven't even heard of it. But back in 2008, it was called Web 2.0, and it was the Obama campaign, lots of communities working with the internet to kind of help each other. Twitter had just triggered into the mainstream. Wikipedia just launched, TripAdvisor just launched, and they were all what we used to call Web 2.0 businesses. And what that means, when you look back at it now, it's just businesses that were powered by communities. I mean, it's all second nature to us now, but at the time, it was quite a big deal. And that was so I'm trying to build the picture. So I had a business problem. We got 10% of our base to churn. I had a customer insight, which was there's a bunch of customers who don't want all the bells and whistles. They want value. They don't care about all the other stuff. And then I had a technical innovation, which was, and it's not really a technical innovation. I'm fudging it a tiny bit for the narrative of the story, but there was something going on out there that was a capability. Oftentimes with innovation and entrepreneurship, something happens in society. So there's a change for whatever that reason may be, and COVID's a damn good one. There'll be something that's happened which means that people's needs and desires change. And in this case, there was this thing going on called Web 2.0, which I thought was interesting from a mobile point of view. And then the final bit, which is again important, is it's all of, it's got to be personal. If you're going to be an entrepreneur, you have to have a passion for the business, and you have to kind of feel it. And again, the best stories when you read lots of books about entrepreneurs and startups is often something that happened to them personally. You don't, there's got to be a personal connection. And for me, I was having a midlife crisis in 2008. So I was just about to turn 40. I was bald and put on weight, and I was having a midlife crisis. And I did what lots of people my age do in midlife crisis, was I learned to ride a motorbike. So I sort of bought this ridiculously poncy Ducati motorbike. I bought a leather, all-in-one leather suit, which made me look like sort of a Teletubby on the way to a fetish party. And I realised that I didn't know anything about motorbikes, but part of my midlife crisis. That's me, by the way, going around Silverstone. I'm actually quite proud of that photo. But anyway, that was a lot of coaching to get to that photo. And what I realised was I knew nothing about motorbikes. Was a lot of motorbike guys are quite geeky. So that's a picture of my suspension strut there. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know how to fix it, change it. I knew that I was heavier than most bikers. So I knew I had to adjust it, that yellow spring as the front suspension, but I didn't know how to do it. And the BMW or the Ducati garage was sort of saying, we're going to charge me 200 quid just to change the setting. And that's when I kind of discovered forums. So back to forums, I discovered all these bike forums, and the real learning point, the real giffgaff kind of moment was when I realized that I could go on a forum, ask a technical question about bike suspension, and realize that within 3 minutes, I'd get 3 or 4 really good quality answers from around the world, around the internet, for free, with all this kind of goodwill. And that was the light bulb moment for giffgaff, which is, hold on, we don't need call centers, we don't need advertising and marketing. We've got a bunch of clever, I hesitate to use the word geeks because it's a bit pejorative, but we have a bunch of clever technical people who are sitting in their bedrooms who frankly know more about the iPhone than our guys do in the call center, and they're willing to share their knowledge for free or for a small incentive. And that was the light bulb moment, which is, let's get rid of call centers and use these again, they're not geeks, but these small number of smart people to advise on how to get your music from an Android to an iPhone, to how to upgrade, all the boring things you have to call a call center for. Let's get these guys to do it for us. Let's incentivize them with some money. So that was the light bulb moment. And that's, again, it's not really technical innovation, but it forums were became a thing, or something that I discovered. And then the final bit is sort of market dynamics, right? What's kind of going on in the world that will help your business? And again, COVID being, an interesting one. And if you can develop businesses that are kind of COVID proof, then that's a good place to start. So what happened with me is I developed the giffgaff idea in August of 2008 in San Francisco. I should have mentioned the previous slide, I ended up in San Francisco, and that was a good place to come up with tech ideas. And then a month later, the financial crash happened, Lehman Brothers, September 2008. And in a way, that was sort of a gift, because suddenly the whole thing about giffgaff being cheaper and better value, and much cheaper in those days than O2, it was kind of like half the price, made it suddenly become much more interesting to my bosses at O2, the board, to invest in it. So again, we'll never know, but maybe without the recession, giffgaff wouldn't necessarily have taken off because it was much cheaper. It was a value play. And again, that was luck because I hadn't developed it like that. Obviously, when we moved forward and innovated around the product, suddenly the whole value bit and the community bit became much more important. So there's a thing about recessions, which we're all about to learn, is the power of community becomes much stronger in a recession. People want to think they're in it together. We all saw this in lockdown in the summer. The whole, trench mentality, the clapping for carers was an example of kind of community-based action. And so giffgaff, bizarrely, but given it's a community-run mobile network, worked in a recession because people felt they were kind of in it together. So that's a little aside. So, and finally, you get to the idea, the business idea. So in this case, I wrote it in my book. I called it 2.0, which is a ridiculous idea. I'll come on to that in a second. And it was that was it. It was a one-page scribble. And it was all about mutual, fair, simple. And that was kind of it. In a way, that was the light bulb moment. So that was a combination of the business problem, the customer insight, the tech innovation, and my personal experience. And I just wrote it down like that. And that still exists. That is the giffgaff business still today. I then, on the way home to London, I turned it into literally like a napkin business plan. So I wrote 8 things down on a napkin, and that was the sort of thing. Sounds ridiculous, but that was the thing that I managed to persuade, the O2 board to invest in. I'm exaggerating. I did turn it into a proposal, but it was, often, and the difference with me versus probably a lot of you, I had the customer insight first. So again, it's important to flag that. People have the idea and they have to go and get the customer insight and get it validated by the customer. I had all the customer insight. So my job was to develop a business idea that would serve the customer insight. But don't be afraid of having something really simple that you can just go and talk to customers about. Sometimes the best ideas are just on one piece of paper, and you can sort of build a prototype out of literally kind of sellotape, or can mock it. You can, if any of you can code, you can literally mock it up into an app. I mean, some of the best research I've done is when we mocked up an app overnight, hacked it and shown it to customers, and they this is amazing. So sorry, this is a different slide than what I was going to show because this has got lots of words on it. But basically, you can look at this probably a bit more detail later on. But customer research, there's qualitative and quantitative. Qualitative is where you ask qualitative questions and you get long form answers. So you ask open questions, you get open answers. And quantitative is where you test. So you give people choices, and you get answers on a scale of 1 to 10, or you pick which one you like the best. Generally, qualitative goes first, then quantitative. And like I said, just talk to lots of customers and non-customers, listen. And the often interesting bit is what they don't say. That's important. They won't, a lot of business, a lot of sectors, customers aren't that involved in. Like I said, insurance, mobile phone contracts, pensions, they're just a fact of life. But no, there's not that many people are bothered about it. So often it's kind of what's the least interesting bit that I can maybe take away. Like I said, shops, bars, webs, forums, Tube, LinkedIn. Understand the dynamics. Who's doing what? Who's going to put out of business? Who's the threat? Whose market share are you going to steal? Like I said, magic wands, good question. What do you love most about the brand? What do you hate most about the brand? And just share the product. Don't be surprised lots of people hate it. Meh is probably the worst response. And, you need to be able to answer, if you're talking to an investor, who is this product for? And you have to give them a name. So you go, it's middle-aged Monty. He's works in the city. He commutes and he wants to, imagine we're inventing the podcast, right? And he wants something to, it's that kind of thing. Give them a name, bring them to life. And it can be more than one. You can go, it's for middle-aged Monty and I don't know, time poor Tim. Sorry, I'm in alliteration mode. But that's, and then what's the problem it's solving? That's really important. And if you can answer those 2 questions, well, you're halfway there. And again, it's surprising how many people can't. They go, I've invented this widget, really, and it's like, well, who's it for and what problems it's solving? And then finally, once you've got a product idea, you can then do some quant analysis, possibly with a Survey Monkey. It's quite easy. I'm just going to crack on because of time. I wanted to call it 2.0. That was never going to happen. I thought it was very clever because it was Web 2.0 and it was O2 reverse, but everyone thought that was a shit idea. So I called it giffgaff, which is a real word, means a mutual gift in ancient Scottish. It sounds a bit like Gav as well, which was a bit of a win for me. But actually, and one thing I would say, and I've done so much of this in my career, the name is not that important. And everyone gets really bogged down in the name. I think these days the most important thing on the name is that it's searchable on Google. I'd spend more time doing that than, yeah, we got lucky with giffgaff, but it was, you know, in those days it was, you know, there was less, you know, internet traffic. But just, I don't get, people spend so long on the name. The name doesn't really mean anything, right? It's not, people don't transfer that much meaning to a name. Just make sure it's searchable on giffgaff, make sure you can buy it as a URL, make sure you can buy it as paid search terms, and crack on. And then you get to the business. So finally the business is, what is this thing? Well, in our case, it was a SIM card. It was SIM only, it was low prices, everything was online, there were no call centers, no shops, built on the principle of mutuality, totally transparent. We had 14 staff. Important to me at the time was it had to be a separate business from O2. That was one of the hardest things. The two hardest things for me to negotiate were the name and for it to be a separate business. I didn't want it to just be a cheap version of O2 run out of the same offices. And then the sort of clever bit was all the marketing and all the customer service can be done by members of the community in exchange for money. That was the incentive. Look, I'm a brand marketing guy, so I like to have a brand DNA. You don't need it. It's always good to try and get it down to one word or one sort of sentence. You know, what is your business? It's this. Imagine you're a door-to-door salesman. You're knocking on the door. Back in the days when there were door-to-door salesmen, you're knocking on the door opens. You've got one sentence to persuade the person at the door to listen to you. What is that one sentence? That is quite a good discipline to get into. You know, and then stick to it when you're developing the business. Just make sure that core bit, in our case, mutuality, which is the core of giffgaff, you deliver on that promise as you build the business and move forward. I'm not going to bother with all of this. The point here was that the original idea, we had to pivot. So my idea was we were going to have 8p calls, 4p texts, and that was it. I wanted to keep it really simple. I didn't want contracts and tariff tables. And actually, I was wrong. The customers actually did want, we called them bundles in the end, but they effectively were packaged up, 5, 10, 15, 20 pounds or 35 pound goodie bags. And that was a good example of, I was really thought it's all about simplicity, 8p call, 4p text. I was wrong. And we had to pivot. And again, as the founder, you have to be prepared to pivot on this stuff. And the thing about what was the reason when we launched it, the thing when I knew we'd on something was when we got members doing stuff for us. So we had a member write the iPhone app for us. We had members build their own websites because they earn money when they sign up other members. They get £5. It used to be real money. Now it's credit on your phone. When you sign up another customer, they got £5. And it's when they did all the marketing for us. They made their own websites, they did their own comparison sites. That was when you kind of go, we're onto something. It was less about getting your first customer base. It was more the engagement model was really important. They made their own merch. You could let them redesign the logo, which again was kind of ballsy, but if you're going to be all about the members and the community and mutuality, you sort of have to. And we even got them to design the SIM packaging. So it was, someone got a tattoo. And then the interesting thing, and just finally on giffgaff, was, you know, if you're going to run a business on mutuality in the community, you have to go through that end to end. So we ended up, when there were price rises, we put them out to the customer forums and get them to debate them for 2 or 3 weeks in a really open and honest and fair way. And so weirdly, when there was even a price rise, the sentiment of the business went up, which is, in my experience, unheard of. And that's not me showing off about giffgaff. That's just sort of the thread from when you start with an idea through to the delivery and the launch is really important, because you can miss it. Because I think the community bit of giffgaff was the important bit, and if we'd sort of dialed that down and just become cheap like, you know, Voxy is now, I think you miss a lot of the goodness. So you know, as the entrepreneur, don't forget about that. You know, there'll always be people trying to get you to change the idea and take this out. That's too expensive. File that down. Add this on. It's your business. It's your baby. You know, stick to your guns, but make sure you've got the customer data to back it up. So look, I mean, that's a rattle through it. I think, in summary, these are the kind of 7 stages of getting to a MVP, right? And you can come at these, any one of these can be first. So this is fluid. If I had time, I'd have done this in a sort of circular flowy chart thing, but you know what I mean. You need to identify the business problem. That's important. What's the problem you're trying to solve? You need some customer insight. You know, who is the customer? Ideally, some kind of change, shift, you know, often to do with the society, markets, trends, helps. Market dynamics, really important. You know, so-and-so's put their prices up. So-and-so stopped doing this. This business is launched. That's important. A tech innovation, not always important, but sometimes, you know, again, and sometimes it's just a tech sort of pivot. You know, Uber is a good example. There were taxi services before Uber. They just didn't quite have the tech ability to show you where the car was in real time and to serve that car up to you. Same as Deliveroo. You know, they're not, you know, the iPhone was a massive piece of tech innovation, but there's lots of great businesses that were not the first to do that thing. They just took it and pivoted it and made it better. The idea, you know, get your idea down on a piece of paper, get it simple. You know, like I said, we got giffgaff down to kind of one word, mutuality, but just distill it down to an idea or a back of a fag packet or back of a napkin. And then finally, you know, the business, and that's obviously the hard bit, is getting to the business. And for me, you know, like I said, product market fit is really important, customer insights really important. And you know, stay true to your instincts. You know, you'll whatever was the instinct to start with, you know, don't let that go. And that's it. So that was a rattle through customer insight and targeting. Happy to answer some questions now. Little plug, as Rui already mentioned, please do check out my podcast series. It's on the Do Lectures podcast. There's a few entrepreneurs on there now. There'll be more in the future. Adam Butson's coming down the pipe, and please do have a listen and then send me any feedback. And I'm now open for questions.
Thank you, Gav. That was a fantastic section. Let me say, even the feedback that the team was having over WhatsApp, we're very pleased with the session. And I was particularly keen in trying the giffgaff paints that you shared with us tonight. We open, as you said, to questions, so please use the Q&A button. There's a few there already. I'll be reading them out to you in a second, but I'll probably kick off with two simple questions. So the first one is, what was your highest point or moment at giffgaff, and what was your lowest and why? If you can share with us.
Highest point was when someone wrote the iPhone app. I mean, literally, that was the moment. It's probably about 3 months in, and we got an email overnight, and it was like, I've written you an app, a giffgaff app. We hadn't got one, and you were like, wow. I mean, there were hundreds of hours of coding, giving it to us for free. That was the moment where you go, okay, we're onto something here. And then all the marketing materials and all that kind of energy, that was definitely the high point. The low point was probably came a bit later. Actually, you definitely, in any business, you know, you'll get the nature of how community networking goes and word of mouth goes. You'll get a bunch of customers to start with.
Mm-hmm.
It's getting the second phase. So you get those early adopters. The problem with early adopters, they like new things. They're all neophiles, so they want to go on to the next new. So you get them, particularly when there was no contracts, they could leave whenever they want. So we'd get them for 3, 4, 5 months and then go off to the next thing. So the lowest point was probably 6, 7 months in, when frankly, yeah, the business was stalling a bit. And we had to break one of the other rules, which we actually had to do some paid for marketing, which we hadn't done up until that point. It was all member get member. And that was tough for me, again, as the ex-advertising guy, going, we're not ever going to have to pay for marketing. It'll sell itself. And that was the low point, A, because I was wrong, and B, because I thought the business might fail at that point.
Thank you. So now to our audience, there's more and more questions coming in. So I'll start with the first one from Denise. So she's asking, taking into consideration today's environment and the fact that we need to do most of the things virtually, how would you recommend to do it an efficient market or customer research?
Sure. I mean, look, I think forums are a good place to start. I think I think LinkedIn, you can do LinkedIn polls. You can do polls on Twitter. You can. I mean, I think look, all the obvious places where you talk to people: Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram. You can. It's actually quite easy now to build a community of people or you can tap into a community. So if you want to launch a flower business, like, you know, Freddie's Flowers, go and find an Instagram group or Facebook group that are into flowers, and just, you'd be surprised how people are very obliging of their opinion, particularly virtually. You're not even interrupting them on the street. In the old days, you used to stand with the clipboard and go, "Have you got a minute?" You know, now you can ask a question on Insta or LinkedIn or whatever, and you'll get good answers. And then the other thing is you can do Survey Monkeys for not a lot of money. I think actually the world's probably easier now because you can actually do most of your research without getting away from your laptop. I would still, I know it's hard at the moment, but I would still try and get your insight from the real world, even if it's a virtual business. But your customer research and your validation, your testing can be done through any social platform.
Okay, now to the next one. This is actually from Anonymous. How do you get exclusivity in the market or stop other brands from replicating your products? That's
a great question. It's sort of the holy grail, right? And you'll have seen this if you ever watched Dragon's Den. You know, it's a classic Deborah Meaden question on Dragon's Den, which is, have you got a patent? What's the IP? And you know, when you do go to investors, they generally the first question is, do you own any IP and intellectual property? That's something that you own. So, I mean, so either you do own it, so you've invented something, and that often will be something technical, or it'll be a piece of code, or it'll be a process. I mean, it's a really hard question. There's not a simple answer to that. You can't. The short answer is, unless you've got something you can patent, and that will be probably something technical. You can't. You know, if it's a sort of service business or a new way of doing things, very, 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 very hard. You know, I think the sort of trick is to be leaner and fast. I mean, having worked for a big corporate and also done startups, you know, even when a big corporate sees, so when we launched giffgaff, genuinely, we were waiting for Orange or Vodafone or EE to copy us. They never did. Vodafone launched Voxy 2 years ago, so it took them 10 years to copy it. You'd be surprised how big corporates are just too slow and lazy and can't be asked to copy it. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. You know, you'll get investors going, what is our protection? If you've got a good idea based on genuine insight, and you can execute it and it can make some money, and you also, you've got a roadmap, so you have a plan for how you can evolve or grow the business. I wouldn't worry too much about it, but it's hard, right? There's no answer unless it's a technical capability, and then you can patent it.
So this one is a good question, particularly because it's relevant to so many of our students, and it comes from Madge. So thank you, Madge, for your question. What were the biggest obstacles when you were starting, and how did you push through them?
So the biggest obstacles were sort of getting anyone to really care. I mean, obviously, when it's your idea, you're incredibly excited. You know, it's your baby, and everyone else, you know, they're like, yeah, whatever. And particularly in a recession, you know, it's hard to get, you know, I mean, I found it hard to get money. You know, I had to get £4.5 million sort of backing from the parent company. That was kind of hard because that's in a recession, people don't really want to spend money. I think the hard thing is keeping your energy up, keeping going. You know, you'll get knockbacks all the time. You know, there's so many stories of brands that they literally were knocked back 30, 40 times from investors, and they on the 41st time they kind of got in. You know, so I think keep your energy up, stick to your principles, and back to what I said at the beginning, know your customer. If you can walk into a room with investors and go, a video, you know, literally just film a customer interacting with your product, going, I absolutely love this. That is gold dust. A piece of film, because you just go, who's it for? And you go, it's for this lady, and you go. And when you seeing someone's face light up, if it's an app or whatever, and they go, wow, that's amazing, that's worth a lot. So I would, you know, full circle back to stay close to customers, keep the belief up, be prepared for some knockbacks, and energy and enthusiasm and knowledge, you know, go a long way.
Okay. Bit of a cheeky question in two-folded by Yusuf, and he's actually saying, thank you so much for this, Gav. Very insightful, and of course, thanks to the team. Thank you, Yusuf. So the questions are, if I'm a thinker like yourself, Gav, what would you suggest is the best way to find a technical co-founder, CTO to join the project with have very little technical knowledge myself? How is the best way to vet technical potentials without being a tech head myself? The second question is, I admire the community-led method you have at giffgaff, which obviously made it a lot cheaper on marketing side of things. For a startup, what would you say is the best way to get your name out in a cost-efficient manner without blowing half of the budget on marketing? So
Wow.
two
These
amazing
are
questions
two
here.
absolute slam of the questions. I love the questions because you're all getting right to the nub of the issue. Right, the first one, again, look, it's not easy. So there are various ways of doing it. There's a thing called Founders Forum where you can, as a founder, they will literally help you find partners. So you can go as a founder to Founders Forum. I think from memory, they'll take, in exchange for an investment or some equity, they'll help you build a team, a founders team. So that's, and there'll be more than just Founders Forum, but there's definitely that, this is a good question, but there are things set up to help you with that. So once you've got the business plan, once you've got the idea, once you've sort of got it as far as you can take it, there are ways of finding founders kind of formally. I think the hard thing is when you get it wrong. There's so many businesses got this wrong, and you hear it all the time of that kind of chemistry partnership between you and your senior team, particularly the CTO tech guys or CPO product guys, is really hard. And it's, again, I think that's when kind of chemistry and vision are really important, if you want to be equals. So there's an assumption that you're going to form this sort of founding partnership, which is normally the CEO, CTO, and someone else, ops, marketing. Now, it doesn't have to be like that. You can be the founder, and then you can get some investment, and the investors will say, "What's the investment for?" And it goes to find a head of product or a head of engineering. So you don't have, if you're, you can try and do both. You can try and find a partner, a co-founder, or and if you don't, you can be very clear with your investors. I need the money to hire a head of product. So, but it is hard because the chemistry thing is really important. On the marketing, again, I mean, the short answer is find a small number of people who are going to fall in love with your product, and then incentivize them to tell their friends. That's in a nutshell. Member get member marketing, which is what giffgaff was, is the best marketing channel in the world, because you only pay once the person signed up. So if I tell Rui, go and sign someone up to my taxi service, once they sign up, I'll give them a tenner. I only have to pay once they've signed up. So it's, and particularly at the moment with social networks being what they are, I'm surprised more people don't do it. Actually, for me, it's obviously with giffgaff, right? We've grown to 4 million customers, predominantly in the early days from member get member. You sign someone up, you got £5, simple. And they signed up meant they had to put money on the account. They had to download £5. So it becomes like a snowball. So I would say that's probably the best way. I mean, you can do quite targeted advertising on Facebook, which can work. But I would certainly, if you're doing paid for on Facebook or you're doing PPC on Google, which again, obviously works, I just don't forget about the member get member. Find some fans and incentivize them. It doesn't even have to be money. You just give them a voucher off for their next purchase to tell their friends. It's very powerful.
Okay. Gav, I'm conscious that we are close to the half-past mark. Are you happy to take a few
I'm fine
questions?
to hang around if people want to hang around.
Because we have some amazing questions
very
here.
tough questions.
And I'm actually keen, like some of our guests as well, to know what were the other ideas? Why did they go wrong? And
The other two.
what could have you done to make them work?
Okay, I'll tell you what they were. So the first one was probably I think it's my best idea, which was I went to see a TED talk, a chap called Emmanuel Jal, who used to be a child soldier in somewhere in Central Africa, and he was then a sort of rapper for peace, which sounds like it shouldn't work as a concept, but it kind of did. And in his talk, TED talk, you should look it up, Emmanuel Jal. It's actually really powerful. J-A-L. He said the greatest gift you can give someone is an education. And I had this sort of light flash bulb moment, which is, why don't we say to every teacher in the UK initially, but the world, if you could give one lesson on camera as a gift to the world, what would it be? Anything, any lesson, just give it to camera and donate it to this to this kind of central repository of lessons.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, for free, no money exchange, you just give it for free. It can be a 10-minute, 15-minute, 20-minute, but give that lesson for free and we'll vote on it. And again, I love voting mechanisms, as you can tell. And the winning lesson each month will give your win £5,000 to the teacher, and we'll give £5,000 to your school. So there was an incentive, and it was a really, really simple idea, because even the worst teachers in the world have one good lesson inside of them. So even that really crappy teacher, you go, just give us, what's your best lesson? And I've seen it before. I trained to be a teacher, actually. So you see even crappy teachers giving one lesson, the class are like animated. Capture that and put it somewhere searchable, rateable, so you don't even need to moderate them. The community moderates it, and over time you'll get the whole curriculum of amazing lessons for free for the world. And it was one of those ideas that everyone loved it. Teachers loved it because teachers like showing off, and you're just going, give us your best lesson. Kids love it because they get these amazing lessons for free. The government loved it. I mean, there was a point in time, we did launch it, where we had the government behind it, had the teaching unions behind it, we had teachers behind it, we had students behind it. We actually had the biggest depository of lessons in the world. We had 7,000 lessons. And then I guess YouTube sort of took over the world, really. I mean, it was annoying. I actually presented it to Google looking for some backing, and guess what? They started doing it on YouTube about a year later, so who knows?
Okay.
But it was a good idea because it made me feel good inside, and it wasn't going to make us any money. And then the other idea was just to get rid of megabytes and gigabytes in any mobile phone conversation. Just don't even talk about them. Sell them as something else. So I developed a sort of, it was a business where you sort of sell data as a tank. So you sell someone a tank of data, big, small, medium, large, and they could visualize as they use data go down. And you could buy sort of packages for Facebook or WhatsApp or it was basically a visual way of selling data without megabytes, gigabytes, which again, had we got it right, or had I managed to persuade them to launch it, we tested it in Germany. I mean, again, everyone loved it. The customers loved it. That was one of those I just couldn't get anyone excited about it. So yeah, those are the two.
We'll revive those ideas one day. Another good question, this time from Oluwatobi. I think I pronounced the name right. And the question is very good. How were you able to make the customers feel so connected with giffgaff, and that they went out of their way to do things for you, as in coding an app, even the giffgaff painter? I also find that surprisingly amazing for such a great community to do so many different things that relate one way or another to giffgaff. So
that's a really good question. I think what we did a few things right. We tapped into a real customer insight, which was for this 10% of this base, they really didn't like their mobile phone network. They kind of were not even didn't like it. They sort of kind of hated it, really. They thought they were being ripped off, overcomplicated, sold a load of crap they didn't need. And there was quite a lot of resistance, but you can't not have a mobile phone contract. You kind of have to have one. So it was really a good customer insight. And then when we launched the business, we were quite honest about the insight, which our original sort of line was the mobile phone network for people that hate mobile phone networks, which was just really simple and quite ballsy, and quite, if you hated the mobile phone network, you're suddenly like, okay, I'm going to listen to this. And then we were very we lived this principle of mutuality. So we had anyone that tweeted about giffgaff, the Twitter feed used to be on the landing page. Even if they went giffgaff's fucking shit, it would be on the landing page. Sorry about my language, everyone. Apologies.
We'll change it at the end. We'll put a bit.
Sorry.
We'll edit it at the end. No worries.
Even if I said giffgaff's really poor, it would be on the landing page. And I think there was an element of, we were honest. So things like, when stuff went wrong, we'd be really honest about it. When we put the prices up, we'd be really honest about it. There's something that I think disarms customers about being honest as a business. I think, and again, it's hard actually. And I've always pushed this in my career, which is to be honest with our customers, be open, be transparent. Most businesses struggle, and you see so many businesses getting it wrong. Look at what happened to Virgin and British Airways recently. Ryanair, they couldn't have all got it. I mean, that industry's got it so badly wrong now. They've got extenuating circumstances, but there's just something about being honest and transparent. And part of the original idea was I didn't want to be this kind of master servant, the master of, we're the master brand, we're going to sell you this contract and you're going to have to oblige it, and if you leave, we'll sue you. To be much more kind of fair, equal, parity, open, which is, look, we're going to run this network, we want you to help us, we'll pay you if you help us. And when we made mistakes, we were just honest about it. It was very refreshing to work. I mean, that original team of 14 of us, if you meet any of them, it was probably the best place to work I've ever worked, because to do something that at the time everyone hated, which was mobile phone businesses, in a really open, honest, fair, transparent way, was just very refreshing.
Okay, I think it's
treat your customers as equals. Sorry, that's a very long way to run. Short answer: treat your customers as equals. There you go.
Let's just boil it down now to the last 3 questions. The rest of the questions we'll save them and try to answer them in the different forum. A few people, Gav, by the way, are asking about the slides, but we are recording this session and we'll make this session available to you separately. If it's okay with you, Gav, we'll also give the slides. A question from Ghana. It's so amazing to know about your business and explore further insights. So thank you, Gav. I have 2 questions. One is, what unseen opportunities you had faced in making your successful business? And the other one is, you can see that your expectations about meeting customers' needs and reaching their loyalty have resulted in great results. So if your expectations...
yeah, that's a good question, actually. Unseen opportunities you face making a successful business. I guess, I mean, I never thought we'd get an app for free. I never thought we'd get these guys doing merch for us for free. I never thought we had loads. If you go on YouTube and search giffgaff adverts, the whole first 6 months of all our advertising was member-made ads. Now they actually were mostly students, and a lot of them ended up being kind of like knob jokes, which wasn't entirely appropriate. But there was just so much goodwill. That was the really, I used to sort of sit there and get all these emails, and one guy drove around the whole country in a motorway and built a coverage map for us. We didn't have a coverage map. He did it himself in his car. He literally drove from junction to junction on the motorway with a laptop and built a coverage map. It must have taken him hundreds of hours and hundreds of pounds of petrol, and he did it. And that was when you get a bunch of customers, like I said at the beginning, there's loads of customers would never go with giffgaff. It's they want the shiny iPhone, they want the tickets to go to. That's fine. They want 2-for-1 deals at Pizza Hut. So that opportunity of just suddenly getting all these customers we used to have a kind of open day for the members once a year. We had 200 people would come on a Saturday to come and hang out in the HQ and share ideas with us. People driven down from Scotland to come to London. So that was an unseen opportunity. And the second bit of the question was, let me remember.
Back to it. If you met your expectations about meeting your customers' needs. So if you had.
Yeah. Look, I think we talk about in marketing, we talk about a customer promise, right? Which is what you either implicitly or explicitly promise your customer. If you go onto the giffgaff website, if you go to the About Us section, there's a manifesto which I wrote in 2008. It's still there now. And so what that means is that everyone that works for giffgaff, because a lot of us have moved on now. There's a couple still there, but not many. It's just being true to yourself. So the definition of good customer service is keep your promises. So if you say you're going to deliver a phone in 3 days' time, or you say you've got 30 gigabytes limit, or you say there's going to be an Uber there in 4 minutes, just to keep your promises. And if you say it's going to take 3 days or 5 days or 7 days, just keep your promises. So, and I think, again, it's quite surprising how customers are so unimpressed with so many sectors, whether it's, look at what Cazoo have done with used car buying, right? Cazoo was a business that launched in December, less than a year ago, had 3 months trading pre-COVID. By June this year, so 6 months into trading, it was valued at $1 billion. And all they're doing is taking a crappy sector, used car buying, and they've innovated through technology and group buying power to deliver used cars in a better condition, for better service and cheaper to the customer. So and again, I think the world now is kind of interesting because the best service businesses like Amazon are also the best, also the cheapest. So giffgaff, very high service, has the highest net promoter score of any mobile phone network in the world. Still, is also the cheapest. So in the old days, you know, good service costs money, but if you look at look at what Amazon have done, look at what giffgaff's done, look at what Cazoo have done, look at what Uber have done, look at what Deliveroo have done. They've made service higher and price cheaper, which equals better value. So I think if you can tap into that equation, you'd be amazed at how customers are like, wow, I'm going to stick with you.
Time for the last two questions. Then this one I think is relevant to what we just been discussing, and one of our attendees is asking, I always get such a varied response on my surveys in terms of what people are willing to pay. How do you decide which group of people to target?
From a payment, yeah, that's a really good question, and that's actually really hard, and that's probably, we didn't really talk about pricing research. Because most people in research will underplay what they will actually be prepared to pay. So you say to somebody, how much are you prepared to pay? They'll say £2. Reality, maybe they'll pay £5, but we're conditioned in research to sort of lowball the price. There's ways of doing research which will get to a better answer. So one of the ways of doing it is not sort of going, how much would you pay? So you can't say it, how much would you pay for this phone?
Yeah.
Is you sort of describe the benefits, not the features, and wrap it up in a sort of service, and then you go sort of, how much is that worth to you, or where do you currently get that service, how much do you currently pay? Pricing research is hard, and it's a bit of a skill. You probably won't get the right answer by just going, here's a product, how much do you pay for it? You need to get a bit more in depth on that. There are ways of doing it, but probably not. I can't probably answer them now. But it's a good question, and it's an important question. But it's probably one of those ones you have to do some quite clever research to get to the answer. Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Again, last question, and I think this is equally important. It comes from Amir. Do you still ride bikes? Amir has a MT-07, so
that's a good question. I don't actually. So I think I've come out at the other end of my midlife crisis, because I'm now 10 years older. I did, for anyone's interested, I had a BMW 1200 GS to start with, had a Ducati Multistrada 1200 second, and then I had a BMW S1000 XR, which was a crazy bike, 180 horsepower, 0 to 60 in about 2 seconds. And I had that bike as my daughter, my third child, was born. And I think we all agreed that I'd scratched that itch. I looked even more ridiculous in leathers, and that I was going to kill myself. And with a young baby, it wasn't cool. So no, I still have a Vespa, which I still love. But I think I've hung up my biking boots forever.
You're riding boots. Gav, I'm sure that our audience will join me in a virtual round of applause, and thanking you for your time today. It has been a great pleasure and a great honor to hear from you and all the journey about giffgaff and how you went from a napkin, maybe from an epiphany in San Francisco, all the way to creating one of the best networks in the UK.
Thank you so much.
Just to wrap it up, today's session, we are bringing out the session to close. I do hope that you join me next week. So if you use the QR code again on my Zoom backgrounds, it takes you to the registration page. Next week, like I said, we will have Eve Wag telling us more about creating business purpose. Thank you everyone for attending. I hope to see you again next week. So until then, have a fantastic week, and thank you so much for your time today. And thank you, Gav, again for your time.
Yes, guys. Okay? Thank you. Take care.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.